What's up, pastors? I want to talk to you today about a topic that'll hopefully you'll find very helpful. It's something I have recently discovered. And let me start by being vulnerable. I thought for a long period of time I was an inferior pastor and I wasn't doing things right and I wasn't spiritual enough. And there was this massive pressure upon me that I just couldn't attain to. And I was like, oh my, I must really be off base. Where does the pressure for pastors come from in our day and age for evangelical pressures? Well, our largest denomination is the Baptist denomination, and they influence us with their highest credentials, with their most professional presentations, with their broadest reach, etc. And so basically they appear to be the professionals of the Christian realm. And so whatever they say trickles down to the rest of us. And when they say, you need to preach Jesus Christ in every single sermon, then we have this pressure to just absolutely obey. I've got to include the salvation message in every sermon or I'm not doing it right. And to me, that felt very unnatural. But then I was like, man, I almost feel like, again, an inferior pastor, and I'm a serious Christian and I really care about my flock and I'm trying to teach them, but man, I don't get the salvation message in every sermon. And recently, as I was watching a John Piper video and getting some perspective on this, I began to see why they want to preach the salvation in every single message. And I'll state it like this. If you are a congregant or an audience member in a Baptist or a Calvinist type church, I want you to know that the way you see things and the way the elite see things are different. They have a different perspective than you. Now here's the perspective I think that you have. And I think it's actually the correct perspective, but I think that as you go to church and you attend church, that as just an average congregant or as a new believer in Christ or even as an older believer in Christ, that you wrestle with sin and immaturity. And you really are trying in your faith, but you stumble and fall and you trip and you haven't made it to maturity yet. Now, a lot of times, and in many places, obviously, there's maturity. Let's say there's 20% mature Christians that actually jump into service and they begin to conquer a host of sins. And so they look different than, let's say, the immature group. But from the pastoral perspective, there doesn't seem to be this growth process per se. There seems to be a viewpoint that within the church there is the saved and the non-saved, and that dividing line is at maturity. You see, John Piper mentioned it something like along this lines. He said, if you believe in the Bible, that basically you adhere to the Bible. If you believe, since you claim to believe in Jesus, then you will believe the whole Bible, and then obviously you adhere to the whole Bible, which sounds like maturity, but it also sounds very presumptuous. Like, number one, nobody adheres to the whole Bible. If you think you do, you haven't studied the entirety of the Bible. You sure have not mastered the Bible, because like unto Paul, the deeper you dive into this, the more wicked that you see that we are, the more corrupt that you see we are, and the farther off the mark you see that we are. We don't ever see ourselves as like totally adhering to the scriptures. But from the elite perspective of the super theologians, it's almost as if the reason you preach the salvation message is to get the immature flock, who are in actuality probably not saved, to become saved, and then when they become saved, they will become mature. And so instead of really preaching about immaturity to maturity, what you really need to spend your time doing is preaching the salvation message, because that's the transformative part. This is where I differ with them greatly. I believe in the process of immaturity to maturity outlined in the scriptures, how we have to climb and grow. And believing in Jesus Christ is not immediately going to align my life in all areas. Now, the Baptist and the Calvinist will probably say this isn't exactly a representation of them, but it's probably pretty precise and pretty close, because the immature crowd turns away often from the Bible. But see, in the Baptist and Calvinist theology, you can't really turn away from God. They don't allow for that. So then it's only the mature who are really Christians. Now, do you see the disconnect here? Do you see that the elite only think the mature are Christians, but the immature that are being taught, once saved, always saved, believe they are Christians? But their teachers don't believe that they're Christians. This almost seems dishonest and disconnected to me. But the reason for sharing this is I want you to kind of see where the pressure is coming from to preach the salvation every single time. If you preach the Bible deeply, you can get into topics where the salvation message doesn't fit in that moment. It doesn't fit maybe in that 30 minutes because you were explaining Old Testament history. The only reason there is such a heavy push is because these guys are trying to get their audience to convert from immaturity to maturity instead of trying to teach them out of immaturity and into maturity. They think that the cross is somehow a magic pill for this transformation. And it just absolutely is not. So please don't think you're an immature pastor because you don't preach the salvation message in every single sermon. Now, I'm going to get maligned for saying that. I'm going to be berated and abused and maybe receive some terrible comments over that. But the Bible message is deep and broad and vast. I am not saying not to teach Jesus Christ. You need to absolutely embrace Jesus Christ. But I am saying you need to teach the entirety of the Scriptures, and that's going to take some time.